So actually reading Nietzsche for himself and letting him speak for himself is often an entertaining thing. Okay, so because he doesn't believe in reason, and because he doesn't believe in truth, he writes in a style that is designed to step outside of the bounds of reason and truth. So his style is intended to reflect his philosophy. He's trying to write in a way that doesn't make us think that he's aiming at some truth and trying to convince us of the correctness of that truth. Instead, he just sort of tosses out interesting viewpoints, not claiming them to be true, but just interesting. Okay, so let me just dip in and read here bits and pieces. Socrates understood that all the world had need of him. Everywhere the instincts were in anarchy, everywhere people were but 5 steps from excess. The instincts want to play the tyrant, Socrates said. We must devise a counter-tyrant who is stronger. Okay, so Socrates then exercised utter fascination and became the tyrant of all. If one needs to make a tyrant of reason, as Socrates did, then there must exist no little danger of something else playing the tyrant. Okay, Socrates seemed to be a physician. He seemed to be a savior. He placed his faith in rationality at any cost. Socrates, though, was a misunderstanding. The entire morality of improvement, the entire tradition has been a misunderstanding. Okay, and so it goes. He uses these roundabout ways of writing, these aphoristic kinds of ways of saying things, these personal attacks, as methods for getting around the Socratic way of thinking. So, for instance, let me just read this one passage where he talks about his nose. Okay, he says, what a subtle instrument for observation I possess in my senses. This nose of mine, for example, of which no philosopher has hitherto spoken with appropriate respect and gratitude, is nonetheless the most delicate tool I have at my command. It can detect minimal differences in movement which even the spectroscope cannot detect. He goes on and on about his nose for like a long time. Okay, this is intentional. So he's saying that there are basically aspects of the human experience that have been discounted, have been seen as being less valuable, which now need to be elevated to greater importance. Okay, I'll get into that a little bit more next time. But for now, just all that suffices, all that we need to know from this is that there is method in the writing style, and he does this in order to try to illustrate his point that he needs to write differently so as to truly get around Socratic ways of thinking. Okay, hence the long discussion of his nose. Okay, there are 2 other points I want briefly to cover here at the end. The point about reason and philosophy, which I've already covered to a certain extent, which is just that Nietzsche thinks that the idea of using reason in order to govern our philosophical affairs is a bankrupt method. Okay, instead we need to use instinct. We need to use passion. We need to explore the world using non-rational capacities. Charles. So yes and yes. Think about the theory of evolution for a minute. What is the lesson of the theory of evolution from a human perspective? The lesson for Nietzsche is that human beings are just like the other animals. We've just evolved in a particular way. And now we've evolved in this way that gives us this moral apparatus where we think that there's right and wrong, and we feel bad when we do wrong. But you know what? If you look at the other animals, they flourish just perfectly fine, thank you very much, without this sense of right and wrong. And so if we could discard this sense of right and wrong and operate on instinct like the other animals do, Nietzsche thinks that we could actually do much better and flourish more as human beings. Okay, so one of his big moral messages, we'll get into this next time, one of his big moral messages is that we need to take our cues from the natural world and look at the animals and see how they flourish on instinct alone without constantly trying to corral their behaviors and limit their behaviors with morality. The received tradition, morality in the received tradition, has told us things like limit your sexual appetites, limit your food appetites, limit your appetite for sleep. These are bad things in excess. But you know what? That assumes, again, right and wrong. If you get around that and live in accordance with instinct, Nietzsche thinks that you can experience greater personal flourishing. Okay, so that's the answer, is instinct. Okay, one final thought here. We've been focusing on Socrates in this lecture, and on Greek thought more generally. Okay, reason used to discern truth about the world. But Athens is only one of the two great origins of Western civilization. The other is Jerusalem. Okay, and Nietzsche thinks that Athens was a mistake and Jerusalem was as well. Okay, so he's got a very complex and sophisticated critique of the Judeo-Christian tradition, which he thinks has welded itself alongside into the Greek tradition to shape Western culture. But he thinks that Jerusalem was just as much a mistake as Athens has been. Okay, and in fact, he thinks that the Christian religion was a conspiracy. He thinks it was a conspiracy. Conspiracy on the part of Jews to dominate the world. Okay? That's a teaser for next time. You guys will have to watch the video, of course. If you want to come on Thursday, you're welcome to. You can come on Thursday. Hear about the conspiracy. Or watch the video, which is just as fine.